up 17-7 in control of the game. And now it's A&M. We're talking about year one for a roster that got a little bit picked over. But, I mean, this is an unbelievable story none of us had coming into the season.
No, and I was down there for the Missouri game when we were talking to Elko as the game right before the game, and he made the decision then to go with Wegman. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Reed came in for the Florida game about 6, 7 weeks ago. I mean, those are great decisions. I mean, we love to talk about Sark and Ewers and Manning and all these things that we probably don't know much about. But he looked at it and he said, I've got to make a change. And it was one of the great moves of the year. And it probably saved their season because you lose that game and then
Right.
you're on the cut line. But we have a game at the end of the year, which we've always talked about as being a great matchup just because of the intensity. But now it may be for everything with Texas at Texas A&M on the final Saturday. But yeah, that was to me the story of yesterday. I was in Tuscaloosa, so I'm a little bit drunk with Bama. I don't. I mean, the first thing we do is bid adieu to Missouri. I mean, Matt, in the two biggest games this year against A&M and Alabama, they've been outscored, I believe, 75-10. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just frightening how poorly that team has played under the bright lights.
Well, and really, you look at it, and we were going into the season arguing in terms of skill position. Missouri with Brady Cook, Theo Weiss, Luther Burden the third, the transfer running backs, Carroll and Nate Noel. You're like, oh wow, Missouri's loaded. They're the team in the SEC no one's talking about, along with Ole Miss, that could make the playoff. And I mean, I know Brady Cook was out yesterday, but that was ineptitude. That was you couldn't get Burden the ball, you couldn't get Theo Weiss the ball, and it leaves you wondering what. I mean, Drinkwitz wouldn't get a better opportunity than this anytime soon with the guys that he had coming back, plus the schedule that was in front of him.
Oh,
And now the Missouri situation is like, okay, if not now, when's this thing going to progress? Because these guys are gone, and it just leaves you like, how did it happen that way?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of debate whether it's Texas or Missouri that got the candy cane schedule, but Missouri's toughest non-conference game was Boston College and then UMass. So I mean, it was absurd, and they really got away with it, not having to play Texas or Georgia or programs like that, and they made the least out of it in Alabama. And as you watch the game, I mean, Alabama was hard to watch in the first half
Yep.
against a really good team. They may have been on the ropes, but they were able to impose their will. And what they got out of that game more than anything else is just some confidence into the bye week as they get ready for yet another playoff eliminator. We saw one yesterday with Missouri, and the LSU Alabama game it may not be the marquee game of 2 weeks from now because there's another game that's more important in terms of drama, but
Yep.
it's the first real playoff eliminator game we've had.
Yes. And what now? I know we hopped off the game, but what now for LSU? Because you see the two losses on their schedule, and I get it. One was to USC, but only one's in conference, so they could theoretically play their way back into the SEC championship. But I mean, it was just so you looked at it and you're like, what happened to Garrett Nussmeier? They were playing so well. So as we sit here this morning, what now for Brian Kelly and LSU?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same old story for them like last year. I mean, you count the number of points they threw away in the first half. It reminded a little bit like the SC game as well at the beginning of the year. They missed two field goals that were makeable. They couldn't score touchdowns in the red zone, and finally their defense broke. And ultimately, I mean, I was so high on them against Alabama, but Matt, I kind of feel all the wind shifting back toward Alabama right now.
Yeah, and look, Alabama still has work to do. I don't think the Alabama that shows up in the first half against a team like LSU gets it done. It was again credit Mike Elko for the coaching switch and the energy, the defense for getting after Garrett Nussmeier. But I mean, really, and that's kind of my story, and we'll button that up with this, Paul. Let's look at the SEC as a whole. What was the biggest thing that you took away from October in the SEC as we head to the final month of the season?
Well, I mean, I'll finish Alabama. They survived. And I mean, nobody got more attention than Alabama. Uh, what was really interesting, Matt, hearing the noise from behind the microphone all week and being there for 24 hours, it just didn't seem as bad. Everybody,
Really?
everybody was still fairly confident. I had an interview with the athletic director, Greg Byrne, on Friday, and I realized some of this is for show. I mean, we are sitting in front of cameras. But I didn't detect a panic situation. The fans were on the brink, but they were holding on because they are Alabama after all, and that carries them a long way. But so I think they dodged it. I'm not about to start speculating on that game against LSU in 2 weeks. But I think that was it. Texas was kind of who we thought we were. I guess Georgia, and I'm going to start there because I they looked unbeatable, even playing terribly at times against Texas. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of back to where we all began, thinking Georgia's the best team. And how many we switched about 3 or 4 times now in the SEC.
Oh, yeah. We've gone from Georgia. We went to Texas for a while, Alabama after they beat Georgia. I mean, it's been a wild month in that league, but I kind of agree with you that as we set to play the first weekend in November, it's like, all right, well, Georgia's still the class. Alabama can still get you. Texas is still right there, and there's still a lot of football left to play. And even Ole Miss isn't out of it after getting their win against Oklahoma yesterday. 3 consecutive losses for Oklahoma. Brent Venables, double digits. I mean, that's probably not the best situation going right now, but it'll be interesting to see how they handle the rest of the season, Paul.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I came away with as well is how underwhelming Oklahoma has been. And they still have Alabama at the end of the season. They have LSU, so their record. They better take a picture of it. It's not going to look this good when it's all over. I mean, there's so many other stories. Uh, but I mean, and I'm not going to waste the audience's time with how underwhelming. So, but probably if you ask me, like, what's the weirdest game of the year?
Yeah.
It's probably Kentucky going to Oxford and winning against
Oh God.
what I thought was a playoff team, and Kentucky can't beat anyone now.
Isn't that like we were sitting there last night? It's like because for a while, Paul, we were saying like, oh well, which Kentucky team is it? Is it the one that got blown out by South Carolina? Is it the one that played Georgia till the very end? Is it the one that beat Ole Miss? And now that thing's just kind of gone. I mean, south of sideways.
Yeah, and listen, Mark Stoops has got a really good resume, but you wonder if after he started putting his coaching staff together to button up the story from 10 minutes ago at midnight, and then found out he wasn't going to be the A&M coach, did he ever recover from that moment? Because it doesn't look like it.
Speaking of recovering from a moment, what do you think Ryan Day is doing this morning after that narrow escape with Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean he's counting his lucky stars because had they lost that game, and they weren't far from it, I mean he could have possibly been out of the playoffs by next Saturday night. I mean that's how. I mean I'm giving you the worst case scenario at Penn State, but this is a team that I mean I was convinced they had more talent than anybody and were probably the best team before the season, and I'm getting really squeamish about that.
Yeah, I mean the shootout with Oregon, they lose by 1 point on the road. They looked every bit of the best team in the country, and then towards the end, Oregon got them. But I mean, it was a Nebraska team that gave up 50 something to Indiana the week before and just got absolutely pummeled. And then both their star running backs, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, had 29 yards and 25 yards respectively, and Will Howard had to lead them down on a game-winning drive. But Paul, it just goes to show you, I mean, this to me, this point of the season, when I look at it, I think the best way to describe it is everything you would think you would expect going into the game cannot be used as a legitimate think piece because just when you kick off or just when you go to another week, I mean, it's completely different than what should be. And yesterday was a good example. We've just seen it every week.
Yeah, I mean, if I were teaching a class here, Matt, on hot takes, I would just say be flexible, be willing to completely reverse whatever you said the previous week without equivocation, because I can't tell you how many times I've done that, even on the show, because but it's the nature of college football right now, and I know the fans out there, want to hold everybody accountable, and good for you. Welcome to it. But it doesn't bother me because I think you have to evaluate in the moment. And this is the most fluid season I've ever seen. I know we'll get to Colorado. I don't think anybody thought they looked like a bowl team 7 weeks ago. Same for a number of the other programs we've talked about. Uh,
Yeah.
but it is the most obvious reason. The portal, NIL, it's changing so many different things.